This actually is something I don't really see talked about much on social media.
You could be surrounded by so many people and still feel really isolated.
Change is hard for us to make, but it's also hard for other people to see people around them changing as well.
The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationship.
You can lead to later issues down the road, whether it's mental health issues.
Being open and honest from the beginning of what your normal is.
We are living in a world that has never been so connected, but at the same time, so disconnected.
90% of arguments can be solved by asking the question, do you want comfort or do you want a solution?
Increase your risk of death as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
They either feel motivated or inspired, or else they feel very inadequate.
First they'll mock you and then they'll ask how you done it.
There's what you say and there's what the other person heard.
It's all linked back to human connection.
Hey there, and welcome to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you're passionate about staying fit, healthy, and mentally sharp, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Cooney, and each week we dive into the latest trends, expert insights, and actionable tips to help you take your fitness, nutrition, and mental well-being to the next level. Ready to level up your health and fitness? Let's jump in and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle. I hope you're all doing good today, and today we have another full house. We're on a roll. We're at that situation now. I don't think anyone wants to miss an episode. We have that habit streak going. So, firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody. We are recording this. We're a few episodes ahead because we like to plan ahead. But so we just released the first episode, and the feedback, all the comments, and just all the support has been absolutely amazing. So I just want to thank every single person that is listening. And a massive favor, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast. And if you can, leave a rating, preferably 5 stars and not 1. And that would also be really, really helpful. I don't know much about podcasts, but supposedly all those things make a huge difference. And yeah, the more we can get this out to the world, the better. And we can continue to make this show better and better, which is the goal. So into today's episode, I'm really excited to talk about this topic. And when I brought it up with the team, everybody the feedback from it was, it's going to be a really, really good episode. And as Tommy said, it kind of might take more, we kind of might have to split it up into 2 parts. And when we kind of created this podcast, something that we said was, we want to talk about topics that sometimes you just can't discuss on social media this actually is something I don't really see talked about much on social media, just because it is one of those topics that I think needs a deeper discussion. So we're going to be talking about relationships and communication. I think it's a huge topic, and it is obviously very broad. We're going to try and keep it somewhere structured, but I know already there's going to be tangents. But you will always hear things like quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. Jim Rohn has said, you are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And Tommy, I think you actually said this. I'm not sure, I could butcher this, but I think it was you. I'm going to attribute it to you, but it was, we are living in a world that has never been so connected, but at the same time, so disconnected.
Copyright.
Was that you?
Yes.
See, yeah, I do listen. So that's, Tommy, I want to ask you the first question. And why is human connection so important?
Yeah. What a wonderful question to start the podcast with. Human connection, if we bring it right back to its primal purpose, simply human beings, we would not survive if we did not have others around us to connect with. It is a primal need of us to belong with other people and to connect with other people. Essentially, when we are born as children, that is one of our biological needs, is to attach ourselves to someone, to be able to essentially look after us, because when you are a baby, you can't look after yourself, and you have emotional needs, you have psychological needs, you have physical needs, and all those needs need to be taken care of by another person. That's true human connection, and that is how we essentially bond with the people around us, is through that form of connection. And when there's a lack of connection, human connection within that, then that's when there's a cause for concern. It can lead to later issues down the road, whether it's mental health issues, chronic illnesses, diseases. It's all linked back to human connection, and it's that essential need in us to want to connect with other people. Something that I experience myself in my own practice is that very deep connection that you have with another human being when you can actually listen to them without judgment, create that connection between two people. So it is, and it's a very powerful, experience, powerful feeling for both the individual speaking and the other individual within the room, because essentially you're saying to them in a non-verbal way, I hear you, I see you, and I understand you.
I think, like you said there, a lot of connection is like not spoken. Yeah, it's the unwritten things, because sometimes it's like you're connected to things, people, you don't know why. You know, you've all had that situation where probably a person or something that you just feel really connected to. And I don't know, it's very hard to explain sometimes. You know, it's like an energy or magnetic field nearly towards something or someone. And you said there, Tommy, as well, about the lack of human connection, what actually happens. And I was looking up some of this, and I remember the first time I heard about this and like the effect that actual isolation or loneliness can have on a human being is insane. And like you said, it actually impacts our physical and our mental health. So in 2015, there was a study that found that social isolation might be associated with lower immune system, making you more vulnerable to viruses and diseases. And something that popped into my head there is, I don't even know if we should say it on podcast, the C word, the thing that happened there in 2019, and like the amount of, again, isolation, loneliness that was a part of that, and that disease, you know, which it just gets me thinking about a lot of things. But in 2018, then there was another study by the American Cancer Society, which examined data from over 580,000 adults and found that social isolation can contribute to depression, insomnia, and cognitive decline. Another study linked social isolation to up to a 30% increase chance of stroke or heart disease. Some other research has linked lack of social connection to increasing the chances of death by up to 50%, which is huge. And then there's one that I found really surprising, was the connection with obesity and even smoking. So some people have kind of said that the lack of social connection can increase your risk of death as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Pretty wild.
Matt, I was actually going to say that study too, so I was about the cigarettes. When I seen that, I was like, whoa. But to be honest, it doesn't really surprise me, the effects of loneliness itself. You know, the detrimental effect that it can have, as you said, on your physical and mental well-being, about not being around others. We've all went through that experience that you mentioned with the sea, and you know, we've all experienced isolation. And I'm sure can't speak for everyone on the call, but I myself have experienced loneliness within the world itself, and it is that feeling of, even when you're around people, you still feel alone, and that is that disconnection that we kind of talked about at the beginning. And if you're in that state for a long period of time, you can only imagine what kind of effect it is going to have your physical body.
Yeah, and I think it could be like really like a silent killer in a way, because I just can't imagine you going to
a doctor or somebody, and them going, how lonely are you, or like, are you isolated? Like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like in the script of questions, when it comes to your health, it's so, yeah, I think it can get a lot of, and I suppose for people being aware of it, some people don't even realize how maybe isolated, lonely, lack of support they have. Maybe that's just always nearly the way that they thought it has been for them,
Connections.
People don't know what lonely is because they assume lonely is you're alone or you're on your own. Whereas, like Tommy, you could be surrounded by so many people and still feel completely isolated. But you're telling why am I feeling lonely? I'm with all these people. I shouldn't feel this way. This isn't loneliness, Whereas you can take somebody who's, and is okay with being quote unquote alone and not feel lonely. And I think then with social media, it's very easy to look online and everybody else living their perfect little life, which then you just in your head that, it's get more caught up in the isolation. And I think that's what happened as well with during the C word in 2019, where a lot of people thought everyone else was happy, living their great life.
Yeah, and I think even if you look at the blue zones, a lot of those countries, like social connection was one of the big things on the list for the people that are living the longest lives in the world. So I think it was it Japan and Italy? The older generations live with their family, so basically they have a lot more connection as they get older. They're not like isolated, going into nursing homes or living by themselves. They actually are living with family and they still feel that kind of emotional support and connection with family and that. And it actually is proven that you live longer you have if you have family and connection.
There was that show on Netflix about the blue zones as well, wasn't it? It was your one is like 90, like dancing around in the kitchen with the family. They do it like every Sunday or something like that. She's been doing it for like 70 years. It's hilarious, and she's fully capable. Like I think she was 90.
Social connection was just as important as diet and exercise.
Yeah, and that actually just reminded me of what you just said there. Is, and I know Sharon, you've read it, and I know Matt, you've read it too, is Lost Connections. And I remember one of the treatments of depression that he says is he went to actually an Amish community over in America, and he found within the Amish community that there was no such thing as mental health issues. And one of the biggest reasons behind that was because of that word I said, community. They're very community based. They all live close to each other. They all they either go over to each other's houses for dinner every single day. Everything that they do is as one, as part of the community itself. Everyone helps everyone, and there's always things going on where people are always being involved, and there's always just that huge emotional bond between the whole lot of them. And I remember, I think he said it is like he asked them something about mental health, and they just said that they wasn't even something that they were aware of.
I did a study as well in Lost Connections that book. They were like, he was talking about how they brought people who were like suffering like with really bad mental, physical health, and they brought them all together to do like some community project. I think it was a garden, and it was like the reconnection to the people who they had like never met. They had absolutely nothing in common with, but they were just doing this together. So they started to like get to know each other, and they were actually properly connecting because they were sharing stories as they were working, and then they were reconnecting back into the larger community. These people who maybe had nothing to give were contributing to the community, and then also in that they were reconnecting back into nature. And the difference in like how their lives changed from how it started to where they were and how they felt in themselves afterwards was phenomenal. And they had nothing in common, but they were just authentically connecting.
Amazing, isn't it? How many treatments, different things there is out there, and sometimes it gets lost. Those things, just like talking with people, getting outside, having actual communication interactions, and it's like, I don't know, nowadays it's like looking for medicine, supplements and things for all this stuff that's going on. And it's like, not that I'm not saying it can't be solved or there's not a place for it, but I think we all underestimate the power of just connection, community, and having that support system there, And I think that's kind of the next topic I want to talk about, is moving into relationships. So a lot of the listeners here are going to be health focused people. And like we talked about in the first episode, a lot of people aren't like that. And you will all have kind of probably experienced this over the years with your own health and fitness journeys, is often this can create a lot of friction in between relationships with friends, family members, co-workers, whoever it is. And, we often hear a lot about things like family members making remarks when when someone is trying to maybe improve their health and fitness, improve their nutrition, or there's people who, maybe they're afraid to stand up for themselves and be open and honest in social situations. They might feel peer pressure into drinking, going up, eating things, whatever it may be. A lot of something you probably have heard as well is like people being afraid to kind of say they're on a diet or they're doing this health and fitness thing, And I don't know if it's like there's that fear of maybe them failing, or there's the fear of being judged, being slagged and mocked for doing it. And yeah, I think that's a huge barrier for a lot of people. And like we were talking about with connection, that maybe people don't really realize how much of a influence that has on them. Thoughts on that? Anyone?
I think there can be like two parts in that. I think the first part would be they're changing who they are, or maybe their identity. So just say Mary goes out every weekend, and next minute she's saying, oh no, I can't, I'm going to my class, or I'm eating better, or I don't really want to drink this weekend. Like, change is hard for us to make, but it's also hard for other people see people around them changing as well. So there can be that part to it. And I suppose anybody who is deciding to make a change, it's like their values now have started to change as well. They're valuing now their health and fitness more, and maybe in their circle it can be harder for them maybe to feel like they fit in if other people's values aren't on health and fitness, and they might feel like, they're going against the grain of it, or they're not fitting in as much as they used to anymore. And that can be really hard if you don't have other people to support you in that.
And I suppose personally, even Ro, Eve, or Tommy, have you guys experienced that in your journey over time?
I guess knowing people, when I made the change, or I guess started working more on myself and putting myself first, noticing the certain people that were only kind of around for the drinking at the weekend or for that, and just having to make that cut myself. But I didn't really, I suppose you get the rolling of the eyes and people kind of looking at you. But I think then again, I'm not sure if it was me internalizing that a lot. And putting that on myself and putting those judgments on myself of, oh, look at this one doing, she's on her health and fitness journey now. So yeah, I suppose I did a little bit, but I do see it a lot when you bring up that conversation with people, or even in the family with like diets and stuff. If somebody saw you eating a salad, they're like, oh, here she is, like she can't enjoy food, or they make up these statements without even actually knowing all the information behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Just on the first point, anyway, I think a massive amount of that is people have either two ways of reacting to someone close to them going through a change. They either feel motivated or inspired, or else they feel very inadequate. It makes them feel bad about themselves, seeing other people maybe around them growing or taking opportunities or developing. That is a choice that every individual has to make within themselves. You get to choose. You can't choose the initial response, the inadequacy that comes up, but you can also choose how you want to react to that and either continue on with that feeling bad about yourself and then acting on that. And then, like what Roshan was saying, making judgments, making comments on people. Or you can actually look at someone and actually ask them, hey, how did you do this? Can I learn more from you about what you're doing? And would you be able to teach me? Would you be able to give me some points? And just on your second point, Matt, it's a very interesting question. I think for me, I felt a lot of support, I have to say, along my own journey to where I am. Something that, as I actually express that now, it makes me feel very happy to express that I have quite a good, strong, and social close network around me that has been very, very supportive with that. In saying that, something that definitely comes up for me, as Roshi was kind of saying there, is definitely like over the years of the photo shoots and that, and those initial responses, oh, you're back in the diet. My man saying to me, oh, you look sick. When are you going to eat? When is this over? Are you okay? And I think there is just a lack of understanding there, really, and a lack of knowledge on people's parts with that too, and I think from that sense, it is obviously from a place of care, but I know something that you've always said to me, Matt, is your mum always saying, would you just eat more potatoes?
I was just gonna say that. I was like, it just reminded me of my mum. Every single time I go to eat something, she'd go, "Do you eat that?" I'm like, it's like rice. It's like a normal meal. She's like, "Do you eat that?" Everything is like, "Do you eat that?" As if like a really weird. It's a weird thing, and I'm kind of like, "What do you actually believe that I eat?" Like, what foods that do I eat? But then, in her defense, when I started doing the fitness thing, I had no idea what I was doing. So I went through phases of like, remember her looking at me, I'd eat like 10 eggs a day or 6 eggs in a blender type of, I don't know, I did all that stuff. So she's seen a lot of that. So she was probably like, from the get go, she obviously didn't know that like 10 years down the line, I'm still not drinking raw eggs out of a pint glass for some weird reason. And I think, Tommy, you said it as well. That feeling for a lot of people, I think what tends to happen is kind of both of those responses. So for a lot of people, that first one is the mocking or the comments and things like that. And like you said, inadequacy, I always look at it like often what you're doing is holding up a mirror. So they're not actually saying it to you. It's what they're seeing, the flaws maybe in themselves of not looking after their health or feeling like they can't do it. It's like near like they know deep down they should be doing those things. And then I think that happens, that's nearly the initial response for a lot of people, especially that aren't into health and fitness. But then I always like, that saying, it's like first they'll mock you and then they'll ask how you done it when you stay going. And that's when, for a lot of our clients, even, like even Lynn jumps out at me here. It's like probably people are always probably asking her now, like, how have you done what you've done? And it's like at first they might say those things, but eventually, especially when you keep going and you kind of show them what's possible, they then basically take inspiration, and that's where they kind of come around then and ask you how you done it.
As well, when you start your fitness journey or when you decide to change, doubt or self-doubt, you might see that reflected in people judging you. And so at the start, all you can see is all this kind of like the comments coming your way, because maybe there's a part of you also doubting that you can do this change, and so that it does seem a little bit more scarier, or it seems like you're wasting your time, or too many people are kind of, saying you're not doing it. But it's past that and then realizing that it is worth putting in, and you get that belief starts to build.
And I definitely think it's something I see a lot is people who won't verbalize their goals or what they want to achieve starting out. And a lot of it is that fear of failure. And funnily enough, on the flip side, there's like research to support publicly putting out your goals and saying things to everybody that actually helps you to achieve it, you know? So it's kind of this balance that people aren't afraid to kind of put it out there, which nearly, because of failing, which nearly decreases their chances of succeeding, versus when you actually put it out there. Again, a lot of you, I do this in our Facebook group all the time. It's like, I'll say things that I'm going to do, and I'm like, crap, now I have to do the damn thing, you know? And it works.
I just told a load of people I was moving to Canada, and then eventually I was like, fuck, I have to go. I told too many people.
Yeah. And Sharon, you made a really good point as well, though, about people changing and people's values. And it's, I'm not sure where, could have been Lane Norton, but he was saying like one of the common things, I could get this wrong, but basically a lot of people who are successful with losing weight and maintaining it long term, one of the common traits is they actually lose friends, or they get new friends who are essentially more like-minded. And this is where you'll see a lot in terms of a lot of people into fitness hang around people in fitness. You know, it's like, it kind of makes sense though. It's like a lot of people that go to the pub end up hanging around people that are in the pub that are drinking more. And somebody was saying this, I can't remember who, but it was like, you find out how your true friends are when you stop drinking, because it's like, do you have friends or do you have drinking buddies? And I think that's quite hard as well, because, you know, imagine someone's like, oh, I want to lose weight, and you just say, perfect, all your friends, bin, you know, that's very hard to take, because first you'd be like, I don't want to lose my friends. And this is where it's not to say that like this is definitely going to happen and you have to disregard everybody, you know, but it just becomes a change, you know. And you probably have all seen it over the years that, again, Tommy, you talked about connection, sometimes you just get more connected to people who are doing the same stuff, you know. But it's an interesting point, I think, that I don't know, a lot of people wouldn't even realize that kind of happens, you know. I think it's just a natural progression in life.
I was with a lady the other day and I was chatting to her. She made a good point, which kind of will come back to kind of that point of like changing friend circles and things, you know, or moving towards people who are kind of doing what you want to do. And it's like, I was just chatting to her about a client I was PTing and changing their kind of physical stance when they were doing something. And she mentioned it back to me. And this lady works holistically with people and their bodies or whatever. And she just made a really good point of when you start to change someone's physical pattern, then as a result, you might be changing their mental pattern. And then that will have a knock-on effect on their emotional pattern and all the other patterns that they have in their daily life. And it just hit me and I was like, that makes so much sense.
Definitely agree with that. And that's why we kind of, even Tommy, we've talked about this, is like why the physical side of things can be so, it kind of has to be the foundational, because when you do that, you will see those knock-on effects. And like someone said it the other day, they're like, when you change your body, your mind can change, but often when you change your mind, you can't change your body. You still have to do the physical work, you know? So, and I think for a lot of us here, and I've said it a few times about working in, it was like the physical for me was the first, and then it just evolves into the mental and the emotional. It just seems to be the natural path, you know.
It does, and thankfully, you know, through online and social media and that now, you know, the mindset side of things, the internal work that a lot of people are doing is just it's more spoken about, it's more encouraged, and it's a lot more. There's less judgment on it. The evidence is there really to show, you know, you can't neglect that aspect of your life and how hugely valuable and hugely beneficial it is for you to understand what is actually happening inside your mind and how much of an effect that's actually having on your whole your whole being.
Yeah. And what we were saying as well about the new friends group, actually, just go back to that, Sharon, because it just popped into my head with like the girls in our group, like Rose, Magella, Jenny, how they've become so close, and then Lynn, Aoife, Sarah, they all met through, again, I'll say MC Future Fitness, but that type of thing. And, you know, they end up going on holidays together now, and you can see that those, when we talk about connection, those type of people who are all on kind of similar paths just become connected. And then you I don't know if you guys will see it as well. It's like when you get them together, it's kind of like, it's like they knew each other their whole life already because they're so similar, you know. And I think it's just great to see how quickly it's like their connection, like we were saying, it's just like that unspoken thing where it's just like they're on the same level, you know.
Like, as painful as it is to lose friendships and lose people when you start growing in that, you realize in hindsight when you look back that they were probably just surface level friendships, and as you put more work into yourself and you find other areas that you're interested in, you want to make connections with people with similar interests because you want that deeper connection, and you don't want that surface level same questions every weekend and never really going anywhere. So there's beauty in losing a few friendships, I guess.
I think a beautiful thing I heard was you connect with someone from the level you're on. So it's not like, you know, it's not like it's a bad thing, you know, when you're not as close with some people. I think it's just when you were close, you were on a certain level, and as people do that inner work, as people start to grow and to change and improve their mindset or whatever work that the people are doing, it's kind of like you start to connect to more with people who are on the level that you're moving up on. You know, it's not always a negative thing.
Absolutely, and this is something that, you know, I've experienced when we talk about when we talk about connection and when we talk about new connections and when you like develop these new skills in life. And it's a question I'm going to ask you, Eve, as well, because I know it's something that you've been doing lately. When I started running, and that essentially was not a part of my identity, I would always said, you know, I'm not a runner. And something that I have felt when I'm on my runs is actually just this like unspoken connection to other runners. I see them running past me, I'm like, how are you? You know, it's like I don't know you, but I'm running and you're running. I have this connection now. You know, I don't know if that's something that you've experienced on your own run or Roisin too.
Yeah, I think definitely. Even when I started running, like I would have been similar to you and always say like I'm not a runner, and I spent like the first probably 32 years of my life absolutely hating running and tried to get into it a few times, and like never really worked. But this time it's actually stuck, and definitely really enjoying it now. But I would have always been like, oh, I can't run, or I'm not a runner, and it's kind of like a limiting belief. But definitely out on runs, when you see someone and you run past someone, I think it was like one of my very first runs, and I was only running like probably 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, but like when I started running, I literally looked like I was dying because my face was like purple. I was just out of breath. I looked in pain, and I remember running past this old man, and he just started clapping at me and like waving, and I was like, that was such a good little boost. And I like felt that like connection then. That it was so funny.
So sweet.
You actually have said that a few times about that man as well. He
Yeah,
like,
he's like spurred me on, even though I
yeah,
only saw him once.
that 10K is actually down to that man.
Yeah, he
Running,
believed in me.
yeah, running's become like CrossFit and Fight Club. First rule is talk about nothing else but running. Just, so I want to ask a question that, because a lot of people will, when it comes to relationships, like we're talking about friends, how friends will change. Family, not going to change. And also, I have this scenario a lot, and I'm going to say it's like females more so that like when females get into relationships, guys as well, but it's more as you know, as a female, often when they'll get into a relationship, it's involved more eating out, more food, and unfortunately for women, most of the time they can't consume as much food as the male, and it's a big thing that will happen is they end up kind of gaining weight because of this situation, you know, and it can create a hard situation for people, you know, so like in both a family or say partners, and like my question to you is like, what do you do in that situation? Like, what is the solution or some of the advice you would give that person if they're having a hard time, maybe with family or a partner, when it comes to this type of thing? I think Sharon is going to go first. Communication.
I think communication is a really important one, that you actually like, you know, chat about, okay, look, you know, I want to spend time with you, but, you know, if we're kind of doing this all the time, can we have an alternative? Or even like, I think as well, maybe in the past, maybe people might know how to approach meals out. And I think it's something like Steve has really taught me over the years. It's like when you learn to approach them, they're not as much of a problem.
I think it's very hard for people sometimes like that to communicate, you know, especially when it comes to family or in a relationship at the start of a relationship, because there's that, like, you know, that period of time where it's like you don't really know each other well enough to do that. And like, I think some people just personality wise, they don't care. They're just like full on. But a lot of people aren't. They're more like conservative. So they're afraid to maybe communicate how they feel or their emotions or whatever's going on, you know.
Well, you've both already mentioned it, you know. It is that magic C word, not the other one. Communication. Um, Communication is difficult for a lot of us, every single one of us here, at different aspects in our life. And I think just in the just in the aspect that you're talking about, Matt, you know, I think it really is just about being able to communicate your needs to either your partner or your friend, and just reminding them of maybe, you know, why you're doing this. And this actually, these words like, hey, you care about me, I care about you. This is very important for me. Can you help me in this? And then it's kind of like a payback reward when the other person is in that similar situation. It's like, okay, these are my needs now in this moment in time. How can I be able to help you? Because you know what, you actually really helped me when I was doing something that was very important for me. That's that kind of that dialogue that needs to happen, you know. But it's trying to have that open space where you feel like you're going to be heard and you're not going to be rejected, and that other person on the other end isn't going to become defensive. Um, but it definitely is a lot got to do with compromise too. You know, you have to be able to compromise. Um, and like obviously we've all done it, you know, it does come up with the photo shoot and that there's a lot of sacrifice within that in the photo shoot in terms of like events, family stuff, friend stuff. But it is only for a period of time, you know, and I think it's just about reminding that person of, you know, this isn't whatever it is that you're doing, you know, that it's not something that's drastically going to change our lives forever.
I think sometimes in that situation as well is like taking the lead yourself and kind of normalizing it can take away some of the tension or the friction. So, for example, I'll give an example. Obviously, it's different, but like say with my friends years ago, when I stopped drinking as much or going out, when I first got into the gym, like they used to slag me all the time, and they'd be like constantly like, "Come on," you know, like trying to egg you on. And I was just decisive. I was like, "No, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna, or I'm not drinking." And at first, there is that tension, and it's like weird. By the end, it got to a point there where if I actually said to them like I'm going drink it, like it was like a celebration. It was like the best day ever for them if I would go drinking with them, you know. And then it was like to a point where instead of being like, "Oh, are you coming out?" they would be like, "Oh, you're not going to come out." Or like, "No." Or and then if I said yeah, you know, and that just came down to me normalizing it, you know, and eventually that just became the normal behavior.
Like, especially with, I guess, starting a relationship, or if it's early days, it's being like what your normal is. Like that, you know, partner's normal could be going out 3 or 4 times a week for dinner. That might not be your normal. And the sooner you bring that up into the relationship and into communication, the less you're going to have to think it and think that you need to be slipping into somebody else's quote unquote normal.
Half the time, the other person doesn't really care.
We
It's
were
like we build up in our own head, and it's just like when you say it, then the other person could be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I don't really care if we go out or not," you know, or whatever it is, and you're like, "I spent the last 6 weeks not being able to sleep because of this this conversation that was just solved in 5 seconds." You know what I mean? Just because I spoke the words I needed to.
Kind of like that. Remember that Jay Alderton said it before about, you know, if you're out and one of his friends offered him, I think, a shot of tequila, and he's like, "No, I'm not drinking it." And, you know, he got a load of slagging from everyone in the group. And I've been in situations as well where like the exact same things happen, and you're like saying no. You feel really embarrassed and mortified, and you think, "Oh, everyone thinks I'm a loser." But like the way Jay Alderton put it was, do you think the next day any of those people remembered that you declined a shot of tequila? And like no one's saying, "Oh, do you remember that time Matt didn't have a shot of tequila?" You kind of build it up in your head, but it's not actually a big deal, and just move on and like don't make a big deal out of it, and it's not a big deal. Yeah, the more you say no, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
I think as
And
well, being comfortable and confident in what normal is for you is really important. So making it the norm for you. And then even though, you know, mightn't be normal for someone else, that you're like, no, this is the way I do this, or this is what I prefer. And not, like Tommy said, just being a people pleaser or a yes person just to suit maybe others.
before about exaggerating, but like if you are in a situation like that and you said no to the drink, felt really uncomfortable, like the next day just yourself that, fuck, I'm actually really happy I did say no and I stood to my ground because I feel so much better today. It's again just reaffirm that you're standing up for your normal, which again makes it easier the next time around.
I think you're always going to feel better when you do that, like versus when you maybe people please. You know, you don't wake up the next day and be like, "Oh, I'm delighted I gave in to doing something I didn't want to do again." You know, and just yeah. And Tommy, you kind of said it. We said it. Communication is key, and this is where with Eve's going to kill me now. Me and you, Eve, something that we've got way better at is communication. And if the podcast cuts off now, it's because Eve has actually turned it off, and she's going to come in, and I'm going to be in a rear naked choke here. I'm airing all our dirty laundry, Eve. But no, when we have a disagreement or whatever, it's always, I swear, 100% of the time, it's because of miscommunication. So what happens is we, what?
It's tone.
So we get into a heated moment, and as Tommy, you love this saying, is when emotions are high, intelligence is low. So when we start arguing with somebody, half the time you'll notice, and you've all experienced this, if it keeps going, by the end you've forgotten what you're even arguing about, but you just want to be right. You know? And something I started doing when me and Eve would argue or whatever, emotions get high, is just actually breaking it down and like going, okay, I feel like this because this is why I feel the way I feel. And what happens every single time is what the way I'm feeling, she thinks I'm feeling somewhere way completely different. And then when I say no, actually, this is why I'm angry or why I'm feeling like that. For example, let's take one recently. What's the normal?
Not
Careful.
laundry.
Yeah.
Laundry, dishes,
No.
the shower
Oh,
leaking.
about
So what could happen? We could be having a disagreement about something, right? And emotions get high, and then what happens is I feel that Eve is making me feel inferior. So something that I don't like that triggers me is when I feel dumb or people make me feel small. And then when I communicated that to her, it's like, this is why I feel like this. She then realizes, oh, hold on, that's not I didn't intentionally make you feel like that, you know? And I didn't actually, and as soon as I say that, she kind of calms down because she realizes, oh, it's actually not about me. This is like my problem. Do you get me? And it's the same sometimes on the opposite end. Eve thinks, or maybe that I'm being condescending, which obviously she doesn't like. And then the thing is, it doesn't even matter if I am or I'm not, because what I used to do is like fight that I'm not being condescending. But the reality is she feels like I am. So it doesn't matter if I am or not. And then my intention is not to make her feel like I'm doing that. So like when I express that, then she calms down because she's like, okay, he's not actually trying to do that, you know? And that's where I swear every single argument is just miscommunication. And it's like when you break this down, it, it squashes it versus like before we'd hold on to it. And then you're pissed off for the day over something that doesn't even, is usually tiny, you know, or it's not even the thing that you start fighting about. It's like you start fighting about something and then eventually it's like, I'm pissed off actually at somebody else. I'm just taking it out on you, you know? And so it's fun. I don't know. I find it very funny that it's just the lack of understanding. I don't know. Is that like every bit of communication with everyone? But I don't know. I thought it was very.
I actually, in a power circle, I was listening to a podcast there, I think a few weeks ago, and she had somebody on about communication, and she was talking about how there's two sides to the conversation. There's what you say, and there's what the other person heard, and it's completely different things. And what the advice he gave, that was like, when you're in a conversation and it gets heated or there's miscommunication, instead of saying, "Not hear what I said," you ask, "What did you hear?" Because 90% of the time they're hearing a completely different thing, because we all have different perspectives on stuff. And again, it could be a tone or something, the way you said it, that triggers the other person to hear it in a different way.
Something that was kind of something like communication did come up in Empower Hour this week for us, and even like communicating, I feel like this, instead of you said this and you made me feel like that, bringing it back so that it can be right and nobody has to be right, bringing it back to yourself of how you feel in it and expressing it.
And yeah, just touching on, kind of what everyone said there too, that type of communication between two people, and how it's so misunderstood is because there's a huge amount of vulnerability within what's actually happening in that moment, because we act on the thoughts that we have, particularly when we're in these very heightened states. But as we know, everything that is happening up here is very surface level. That's like there's some sort of vulnerability within you that's after being triggered, and it's after creating these thoughts in your head, and then you're acting on these thoughts, and then the emotions are getting higher. You're gone outside your withering tolerance. There is no cognitive functioning happening whatsoever. So it is impossible for you to actually be able to see, hey, this is actually what happened to me in this moment in time, because you're in a very heightened state. And it's trying to learn to be able to, one, take a deep breath, finding out, okay, this is what we need to do if we're having a disagreement. Is like, okay, we both agree we've gotten into this state. Let's back away, both leave the room, and then come back in like 2 or 3 minutes there when you're that bit lower. You've had a bit of a chance to actually take a breath for yourself, allow the thoughts to come down, and actually see what's happening for you in that moment. That's quite a powerful statement I usually like to use. Is like, what's actually happening for you in this moment? You're telling me this, but what's actually happening for you in this moment? Let's get into that. Because that's where you're really getting into the nitty gritty of actually how you're feeling at a core level about what's happening to you. That does not happen 9 out of 10 times. But that one time it does happen, feels good.
Yeah, I think as well with things like that, if you're kind of dealing with something or like a heated moment, but like not like, even if it's a message or something like that, not responding and giving yourself, okay, I'm going to sit on that for 24 hours because usually what you want to say at the time, the next day you're like, oh my God, I'm so happy I didn't send that message or say that. And I'm so happy I kind of waited until I calmed down a little bit.
What did you say, Eve, as well, or where did you hear it? Was it like, do you want, what is it? What is
Oh
it?
yeah,
Do you want comfort or do you want solution?
yeah, it was like 90% of arguments can be solved by asking the question, do you want comfort or do you want a solution? And I was like, that's actually such a good point, because often, like, you know, if you're having an argument with someone, and then, well, when I'm having an argument with Matt, basically, he'll just try to start maybe give me a load of advice. And I'm like, I don't want your fucking advice.
That's, Tommy, you know me, I'm logical. So I'm like, problem, solution. What's the solution? And then it was only when you said this to me recently, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. You don't want a solution most of the time. You just let it out. You
I
know,
just want to
Whereas I'm
vent.
trying to figure. I'm like, what's the actual solution here? Or it's like, oh yeah, you're not looking for it. That's why it never works.
You
Book
just want to
Women
vent.
But that's
Venus, Men Are From Mars talks about that. The book Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars. They actually talk about how men are more programmed. So like women just need the space to talk and just get it all out. Whereas men are like coming in more kind of trying to problem solve a little bit. And the frustration that can happen in that.
I'm learning.
I'm going to say I saw it somewhere as well. During a ask if, do you want advice for this, or do you just want space to vent? Because sometimes if you give advice to someone who's not looking for advice, you're riling them up and you're trying to correct what they're saying, and that they're not looking for that, like what happens with Eve. And I'm kind of like Matt in the sense that I'll try and, like, you know, solve a problem, and a lot of times people they don't want the problem solved. They just want a space to get whatever they want off their chest. And even asking that question, like, do you want advice or do you want just a place to vent, can make them feel a lot more comfortable and more connected in the communication.
This happens with clients and voice notes as well a lot. Is clients will solve their own problems by the end of a voice note. So like the amount of times I've just had to voice note back and be like, yeah, see how they're like, in 5 minutes, the last minute, you just solved the problem that you actually were talking about for the first 4 minutes. You just needed to actually get it out. I could just send back a thumbs up. That actually leads.
Oh,
You go.
that was brought up in that podcast was about a problem, and if you are having to almost make the problem third person. So instead of fighting each other, you're like, okay, the problem is the laundry. So how are we going to work together and get the laundry done, rather than each other? Because you're not making it personal, and it's a nice way of. And then when you're saying, how are we going to work together, you're creating this bond between the two people rather than pinpointing and attacking one person.
I'm just
Love
thinking
Matt.
about Matt doing laundry.
Eve, that's so funny that you're saying, I'm thinking of Matt doing laundry while you're tying something in your hands. And I'm like, Matt, I'm going to have to text you an hour later to see if you're all right. Your body is telling me
Okay.
something.
He never separates the whites.
This podcast, if there's no ending to this podcast, you know what has happened. I don't even get to say it. Do you want comfort or a solution? Yes, I think with communication, it's such a huge topic that there's so much more I want to talk about on it, but I'm wary of the time. And I think we're actually going to have to do another episode, which is because I want to actually get into probably how we communicate together, because I think it's really valuable for people to see how we all actually interact as a team, because even I think our dynamic is very interesting, and it's, in a way, it kind of shouldn't work, but it does. I think due to the way we kind of approach the way we communicate and the way our relationships are. Would you guys agree on that?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Basically, I just say it and you agree. That's it.
Yes, sir.
I don't have anything to add.
I just put everything out then of it. Basically, I only hear what I want to hear, and that's it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to leave it at that, because I think if we start to get into our dynamic, it's going to take a full podcast to get through it. And what we're going to do, we're going to finish on our random question. Or, guys, actually, do we have any kind of closing thoughts to round up what we've been talking about with connection, relationships, and communication? Tommy, I think you have some good thoughts.
Yeah, I just think, as in terms of relationships, you are a human being, you are constantly evolving, you are constantly growing. So you are constantly going to be developing new relationships. And that's actually a good thing in life. Because the more people you can develop relationships, the more that you can be able to learn off them. I think as you get older, your circle does get quite smaller, and you choose people rather than letting in a large amount of people. I think you choose people at a very individual level. And just in terms of communication and that, with communication isn't easy. It never is. But it's if you can get it right, it creates so much connection between whoever it is that you're trying to communicate with. And one of the goals and purposes of life is to create deep and meaningful connections. As I said, as you get older, I'm not just I keep using that word, but you want to create deep and meaningful connections in your life. And if you can get communication right between people, and if you can learn to communicate with yourself, then you're going to live a better quality life because of the type of relationships that you have around you. But as I always say with everything, it is a practice. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to get it right. And just keep on learning.
Also, with if you're like growing and working on yourself and pushing past limiting beliefs and all of that, that's amazing. And there's so much work you can do on your own. But a lot of times, taking those out to the real world and having interactions with other people, and even if it's the little communication between you and the barista, every little interaction we have is we're gaining something from it, or we're learning something from it, and it's helping us reaffirm those new beliefs that we're building for ourselves. So communication and connection with other people is so important.
And I think it is really life, isn't it? Like every conversation, everything we do in life is a relationship. It's a to and from, and you're either essentially building it or breaking it, depending on whether or not you're putting effort and time into it or neglecting it, and relationships, they're kind of like, first it's a skip. You actually have to put the time into it. And it's kind of like a flower, you have to water it to allow it to grow. That's the same thing. So I'd say for anybody listening, to round it off, is go back to the isolation part and just have a think for yourself. Like, because I know for me, I would definitely be, if I wasn't forced to do a lot of more social things, I'd probably be very much, I feel isolated, or I won't say loneliness, but definitely going down that route more. So be aware of that for yourself and see, and it's very simple to, like, I always catch myself doing this, and I say it to clients and people as well, is like, reach out to people, have a conversation, literally, like your friends, family. I can be terrible for keeping contact with people, and I always have to remind myself to make that effort, and then with your relationships, I think we said it here, like communication and honestly just being open and honest is probably the best starting point. It's like, don't build everything up in your head, just get it out. Even if it doesn't sound right, as Tommy said, like, you can work through it. You can't really move on or get better if everything is just being bottled up, you're not actually expressing yourself. And I think, yeah, it's not easy. Have you said it? I think nearly, in a way, Irish people are not good at communicating either. We're more like the head nod type of people, and like, how are you? I'm grand. Everything's grand all the time, all day, every day, 365, no matter what's actually happening. So, guys, to finish up, we have a random question as usual. I nearly forgot about it again. This question is weird. What was the unspoken scandal in your town when growing up?
We're all from the same place.
When you finish the question, say it again.
What was the unspoken scandal in your town when growing up? I feel like Willie Bulger asked this question.
No comment.
Plead the fifth.
I think we should move past
Did,
it. Yeah.
did someone ask us that?
It's there's a site that randomly generates questions, and that's what happened.
Imagine if somebody asked us that.
That's AI trying to sabotage us.
Yeah.
There,
I can't actually think. There's a lot of unspoken scandal, I presume.
not for a
Definitely
podcast.
spoken about in English.
Yeah.
Spoken.
The reason it's unspoken.
We've been talking about communication, and now it's like
Yeah, no, we're not going to talk about that.
we'll answer it the same. There is no scandal. We communicated it all, solved the problem, and we're all good to go. And everybody in Nina is still talking to us after this podcast. I'm happy with that. Are we all agreed on that?
Great.
Perfect. Guys, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's show, please take a moment to leave us a review and share it with someone who could benefit. Every single review or share helps us grow the show and will allow us to keep bringing you more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes where we'll be sharing more tips and insights to help you take your health, fitness and mindset to the next level. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, consistency beats perfection. See you in the next episode.